Hey folks, this is a Paranormal Truth Seeker. Hey, I told you I'd share some of my personal experiences with you. But before I get started, please do me a favor. Please like and subscribe and comment. I just want to make sure that you guys are enjoying these videos and maybe you want me to speak on a subject. So I decided that, I would share some more of my personal experiences about my experiences at a very young age up until, we can say today. But before we do that, let's make things a little more interesting. Oh, but you thought I was gone. Well, that's infrared for you. Okay, so let me get started. You can see me, but I can't see you. It's pitch black in here, except for the infrared. So here's my beginning of getting into the paranormal. My first experience that I remember, I was about 4 years old, so I could communicate pretty decently at that time. And I woke up one night. I couldn't tell you what time it was. I probably couldn't read a clock, anyways, at that point in time. In my life, I woke up and I saw outside of our window of our bedroom. Now, keep in mind, this was a house built in probably 1905, something like that, maybe before. It was an old house. I couldn't tell you, just from what I remember about it. And looking back, I'm just going to have to guess. But it had big old windows on it, so these windows were very tall and kind of narrow, much like you see in old buildings. It was our bedroom window, and I looked out the window, and there was this figure standing there. Well, today we would call those a shadow person. Hat, everything, red eyes. I can't tell you that I was terrified, but I was a little apprehensive of it. I didn't know what it was, didn't have any idea. It was definitely kind of spooky. Of course, a kid that age would know that word. But the next morning, I got up and I told my mom about what I saw outside the window, and she told me it was an owl. And so after that, I won't say exactly as afraid of owls, but I was kind of leery of them. And so that was my first experience that I remember. Now, probably within about 6 months, other things began to happen. I don't remember most of it. Um, but we had a neighbor that had a well house, and that's where they had the pumping system or whatever, I guess, for their well. And a lot of people, it's pretty common, they'll build them out of cinder blocks or whatever. And this is an experience that myself, the homeowner's daughter, my twin brother, my little brother all had at the same time. Let me clear my throat a little. Anyways, make sure there's no ghost around. I think I see one somewhere. Probably right back over my shoulder if you look. In any case, so what happened was um, we opened the door to the well house for whatever reason, and this humongous, when I say humongous, I mean probably had legs that were 10 inches, 12 inches long. Spider, tarantula looking thing is all I could tell you. And it kind of came out into the door and it stopped and it looked at us. Of course, we were all afraid, so we shut the door. And we thought, what the heck was that? I don't remember exactly what we thought, but something along that. Well, kids being kids, sometimes you don't know when to be scared. We knew it wasn't right. We opened the door again, and same thing happened. It came out again, kind of crawled out there and looked at us, and we screamed. I don't know if I screamed, but I know one of the girls did, and we slammed the door shut. So we went and got our parents and said, hey, there's something in there. We didn't know what it was. Of course, they opened the door, nothing happens. And that's pretty typical. So, with that being said, anybody that's watching this as a parent, if your kids are telling you they're experiencing things, you might want to listen to them because they really could be. Now, again, it'd be easy for me to say myself if I was the only one that saw it. But thank God I normally had a lot of these experiences with other people. So, moving forward, we moved into a house a year or two later. I can't remember, I think it was around my fifth birthday, but by my sixth birthday, things started happening in my house. Now, I've mentioned before my twin brother. Him and I shared a room. We started hearing a rocking chair that we had in the living room rocking and other things, the springs that catch your doors. We would hear it at night going doing, yoing, 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 and door stops. So if you try to do it, just go very quickly. Don't ask me to make those sounds again. But anyways, long story short, we would tell our parents, and they just kind of wrote it off as our imagination. Now again, thank God that my saving grace was that I had somebody else who witnesses these events and experienced them right side by side with me, literally sometimes. Well, things begin to escalate. Now, this is going to sound very strange to you all, but I'm going to tell you anyways. Laugh, say I made it up, I lied, I don't care. My brother, if he were here, would tell you it's exactly what happened. So, quite often we would get scared, and if I was scared, we were on a bunk bed. I was normally on top. I'd wake up and my brother would be in bed with me, and sometimes he'd elbow me, and I'd wake up and instantly I'd be afraid because I knew something was going on. So here's what would happen sometimes. This hand, and I want you to listen to this very carefully, would reach through the covers, which was a solid object, okay? Then grab us and try to tickle us or shake our arms, our legs. Never did any harm to us. The only way that I could describe the touch of this hand was that it felt almost as if you were to bump your funny bone, which when you bump it, it's not funny except that people see you do it. When you bump your funny bone, you kind of get that little tingle, and that's what it felt like. So one night, I decided that I was going to grab the hand like this with both hands. And as the hand was tickling me, and it stopped tickling me immediately. And so I had two hands around it. Of course, my hands were smaller then. And instead of this thing fighting me to get away, it just went through my hand, just as it had passed through the covers. And so I had a number of experiences, and after that I wasn't afraid of it, whatever was going on. But this thing would do that quite often. We'd hear walking. There'd be a little bit of kinetic activity, like I said, nothing real scary. So this is kind of what I grew up in. Myself and my twin brother and all my brothers, there's four of us, were adopted. And later, this is where it gets very, very interesting. I was able to find out that my actual birth father had died about that time that all this stuff started. So I developed a big interest into the paranormal, watched all the shows that I could that were out there, learned as much as I could. Anytime I could buy a book, I'd buy a book on the subject, and I learned. And eventually I started doing some investigating in the 80s, early 80s, going out to cemeteries after I saw a show on it, putting tape recorders out there and trying to capture the voices. At the time, I didn't know the name of it, what the phenomenon was, but I studied it. And over the years, through EVP, which is my favorite subject, I did work with, also mentored by Dennis Houck, who was the consultant for the movie White Noise. I learned quite a bit. And there's a lot of scientific research I've talked about that in another one of my videos, so you're welcome to go check that out. But long story short, I designed what is known as a contact system. I spoke about that in one of my videos. One of these days I'll do a video using it perhaps. But Rod Ive and others, Jurgensen, found that they were able to communicate with their relatives. And so I was able to find out that indeed my father had passed, and he would come through on EVP. And the way that I knew that he had come from a different country, and I could ask him specific questions. I didn't know my mother either, and found out she passed. Now this is very interesting. I'm just sharing some of my experiences with you. So my adopted mom would tell us little tidbits about our parents. She never hid the fact that we were adopted. And I had started this contact session, and I'd asked for relatives, and people who came through were mostly people on my adopted mother's side of the family, grandparents, uncles. I mean, I instantly recognized her voices. I had a cousin who was my age at the time who had passed about a couple of years before I did this, and she came through and gave us very specific information. Very, very interesting. So I asked if there are any other relatives, and this female voice, when you ask these questions, if you ever do anything like this, let the recorder run for about 15 seconds after you ask a question, and take about 15 seconds between each question before you decide to ask another. Make sure everybody's quiet. Always notice somebody talks. Always did a lot of this by myself at home. It was a research project. Anyways, this female voice came through and said she was my mother. And one of the other voices immediately said, "Oh, no, you're not his mother." And that's about the time I cut it off. So I was using the contact system, which recorded through a computer. And so I said, okay, I want everybody else please to be quiet. I want to speak to the person who claims to be my mother. So I started asking her very specific questions. She had all the answers, and told me, when I asked, I said, so what about my father? Now, I'd had news that he had died years before. And she said, you just have to ask for him, Ron. That was her question. That was her statement to my question. So I thought, okay. And so I was able to make contact with what I believe an entity that claimed to be these. Now, whether these are the true people or some sort of entity impersonating, we can't prove it. People are going to swear up and down they can. Now, I can tell you there's been research into transphysical mediums where they actually have people who manifested just as solid as I am looking to you right now on camera. And so, long story short,
available and mobile at this time.
it's one of my guys.
Cura Health North
Anyway, so
in Oklahoma City.
what began to happen?
Back to home quarters.
What began to happen?
Now I'm gonna go mobile and check a few things, and
anyways,
then probably go to home
so
quarters.
there's proof right there. Disembodied voices, folks.
Mobile 11:04 p.m. Central. Mobile site.
Anyways, so these voices came through, and they claimed to be certain individuals. But going back to the mediums, they'd fingerprint these people, check things, and people said, "Yeah, this is the person."
Brother.
Very well documented. You can look up Maribelli, Helen Duncan, and others. So it wasn't somebody in a sheet. These were actually people who were being manifested. And so I began to research. But where it gets really interesting is the voice that claimed to be my mother. I had a discussion. Let me turn these guys off real quick.
That's the satellite vision view off of radar Omega of Hurricane Laura.
Okay, so my guys are.
First one was
I do
2D. The other one's a 3D.
search and rescue as well. So that's what these guys are talking about. They're keeping up on this stuff. So, anyways, what happened was these voices claim to be a lot of different things, and we can't prove it. So, with that said, let me turn these guys off. That's how busy I stay, guys. So, with that said, a lot of people are going to think that somebody under a blanket or faking the whole thing. Now, this stuff has been well documented and researched, so I'd ask you to look into it for your own good. Don't believe it all. Question it like I do. I'm not saying that it's absolutely real, but it seems that proof is there for many. And so what I would do is I would look at that evidence, I'd examine it, come to your own conclusions. You can say it's all fakery and trickery, but there were people, like I said, who investigated these people to the nth degree and found out, no, these were indeed those people. It wasn't somebody under a blanket, under a dimly light. Yes, it was dimly lit, but they knew questions, they had answers, specific answers. So I would look into that. And in the case of Maribelli, he was manifesting these people, and there's pictures of it if you look. Just as solid as I am, and people were conversing with these people in broad daylight. In fact, one of the guys there was a doctor, and his daughter had died at about 6 years old, as I recall the story, and he was able to manifest this girl in the dress that she was buried in. So the doctor instantly knew that was his daughter, and basically told him, "Hey, don't be sad for me anymore." And according to the story, now there were lots of witnesses there, just said she floated up in the air and disappeared. So take it for what you want. I mean, there were witnesses to a lot of this stuff that they kind of keep hidden. And the reason it's science, and this is part of my story, is that the reason science doesn't like to acknowledge this stuff is because if we were talking, 200 years ago, and I walked over to this switch and flipped it on, somebody would think it was witchcraft, devilry, whatever. But you and I today understand what's going on. We understand the wiring of the switch, the power plants, and everything else that's involved. Maybe not to the nth degree, but we have the basic understanding. They don't. And that's where science is with the paranormal today. And so a lot of times they want to foo-foo it because they can't see what's going on. And so my goal in life is to help people that are having those experiences and help them to cope with them. Some of the cases that I've dealt with in my almost 40 years now, and dealing with the paranormal and exploring and investigating and helping people. Some that's been very dark and some that's been very benign, so to speak. So that's kind of one of the stories I wanted to share with you all, where it all began, how I started, and why I got into it. So it's a very big interest to me. I'm one of those people that if you would have asked me 30 years ago what I thought about some things, I would have laughed. If you would have told me about potential elves and things, I know some of you may laugh at that now, but after you've seen my story with the Nunapede, again, thank God my twin brother was there, then you would have an understanding of why I'm open to a lot of things that people aren't. I'm not saying I absolutely believe it. I'm just saying I believe in a possibility. And so again, like I told you in the beginning when I started this journey, and I told you I'd share stories, I'm not telling you to buy everything I say hook, line, and sinker, but there are things that you can do, you can experience on your own. One of those things, again, is EVP. Anybody with a recorder can go out and experience EVP. It's a lot like fishing. You may not catch the biggest fish, but you fish long enough, you're going to catch a bigger fish. And that's how this thing works. I've got some Class A EVPs, and I have some that are garbled. So you're going to get more of the garbled than you are the Class A, but they do exist. I've seen a lot of different phenomena happen with EVP. I've had instances, for example, we talk about an EVP that we captured during an investigation, and lo and behold, that EVP will appear on that recording right after we spoke about it, same voice. I don't know how it happens. I've seen it happen more than once or twice. So the field can be very interesting. I would just challenge you to go out and investigate, see these things for yourself. And when you do, then you'll begin to see that it's real. So that's all I've got. I just want to share that personal story with you. And that's the beginning of my journey and some of the things that I learned over time. And I just wanted to share that with you. And I hope you feel comfortable sharing things with me. If you want to share a story with me, you can contact me on my website and my email. prosinvestigations.com is my website. Or you can email me at prosghosthunters.com or at yahoo.com. Again, prosghosthunters@yahoo.com. So again, I want to thank you for watching this video. Please like and subscribe. If there's some area of the paranormal you want to talk about or want me to look into, I probably had an experience perhaps somewhere. I know somebody who did. I'm planning on making a video on jinns and some other things based on stories that I've heard you might find interesting. So some of what I'm going to tell you is hearsay. Some of it's my own experience. So I want to thank you for watching this video, and well, see what's going on with my guys. All right. Thank you.